All right, good evening. Welcome back to another evening of Daf Yomi, sponsored for the month by Jeff and Chava Bela Wall, Leili Nishmas Jeff's father, Mr. Roman Wall, Abraham ben Shmuel Zichron Levrach, and grandfather, Mr. Menachem Eisner, Menachem Mendel ben Mordechai Zichron Levrach, who's your sites. We're on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, may their neshamos have an aliyah. And also sponsored for the month by Shmuli Miriam Fuchs, Leili Nishmas Shmuli's mother, Bela Yenta Baschuna Zichron Levrach, whose your site is on Rosh Chodesh ER, may her neshama have an aliyah. We continue on Ayin Gimel Amud Aleph. We are at the word Mesiv. Amud Beis, sorry, it said Amud Beis, thank you. And Mesiv, which is why can't I find where we are?
5 lines at the top.
5 lines. Right, I keep going further down, that's why. 5 lines from the top. Okay, Mesiv Rav Chama bar Guria. So what we were discussing is, if a non-Jew, right, sends their korban to the Beis HaMikdash, can they bring a shlamim? Or is everything brought as an olah? So we said it's always brought in an olah, and we have a pasuk that sort of indicates that. We had a svara, a logical reason why that makes sense. They always send things for the Beis HaMikdash that mean that it goes to Hashem, and so you wouldn't give anything to the Kohen. So Rav Chama bar Guria asks on Rav Huna's statement that everything is always brought in as an ulah. Mesiv Rav Chama bar Guria, Ove kocham mishis nadev lahavi shlamim. If a non-Jew accused of Ove kochav, an idol-worshipping Jew, that he pledges to bring a shlamim, nisanan li Yisrael, he can, if he gives it to a Jewish person to bring it, as his shliach, it sounds like, Yisrael ochlon, then a Jewish person can eat it for him. Nisanan lekohen, if he gives it to a Kohen to bring it for him, hakohen ochlon, then the Kohen gets to eat it. So it sounds like it doesn't turn into an olah, right? Whoever brings it for him on his behalf gets to bring it as a shlamim. So Amar Rava says, Hachi ka'amar. This is what it means to say. Al menas sheyischaper bahen Yisrael ochlon. If he gives it to a Jewish person, meaning a Jewish person has a plan to bring a shlamim, and a non-Jew says, hey, that's a great idea, I'll pay for it. But the Jewish person is ultimately bringing the shlamim, then the Jewish person gets to eat it.
If an animal has a mum, you can't buy a korban, right?
That is correct.
How about if a non-Jew gives
can't bring it as a korban. Regardless, always mum is a problem in the animal, right? So therefore, no animal that's a mum can be brought. Al menas sheyischaper bahen kohen, if he says that this is supposed to be brought on behalf of a Kohen, so then the person is bringing is a Kohen, so Kohen Ochlon, then the Kohen is basically he's sponsoring somebody else's korban.
As a shliach.
Well, no, not as a shliach, right? Before we thought it meant as a shliach. Now we're saying, since this Jewish person is bringing the korban and he's paying for it, it's really a Jewish korban. Before we were saying the non-Jew says, this is my korban, and I would like this Jewish person to bring it for me, then it turns into an olah. Okay, so Mesiv Rav Shizbi. So Rav Shizbi wants to ask a question of Rav Huna. Elu Menachos nikmitzos. These are the mincha offerings that get kmitza. Ushiyarehem lakohanim. And then the remainder of the offering goes to the kohanim. And on the list is minchas ovdei kochavim, is the mincha of an idolator. So how can that be? Right? Because we said that all of it's supposed to be burned up, none of it's supposed to be consumed. So how does the leftovers go to the Kohen? So Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Lokash Rabbi Yochanan says it's different. Ha Rabbi Yossi Haglili, ha Rabbi Akiva. It is a machlokas between Rabbi Yossi Haglili and Rabbi Akiva. Detanya, we learn in a brisa that talks about in Parshas Emor, when it talks about bringing korbanos as your pledges. It says ish, right? A man who brings his korban, asher yakriv korbano l'chol nidreihem u'l'chol nidvosam, that he's going to bring his korban for any of his nidarim or his nidavos, asher yakriv l'Hashem la'olah, that he wants to bring as an olah. Then the pasuk says, ish matama lomar ish. So if the pasuk says ish, a man has to bring it, why does it say ish twice? L'rabos es ha'ovdei kochavim shenodrin nidarim u'nidavos ki Yisrael. That is the source that tells me not only when we say ish, a Jewish person, but ish, any person, even non-Jews, can pledge to bring a korban just like a Jewish person. Then the pasuk continues, asher yakruvu laHashem la'olah, that he's bringing it as a korban to an olah, ainli ela olah. So that means that a non-Jew can pledge an ola. So shlamim minayin. How do I know that he can also pledge a shlamim? Talmud lomar nidrehem. Any pledge. So a neder is any kind of a pledge, and a shlamim is a pledged offering. So toda minayin. What about a korban toda? Can a non-Jew bring a korban toda? Talmud lomar nidvosam. Right, and nedava is also a type of a pledge. So he can also make a nedava. So that's another type of korban, means even a korban toda he can bring. Minayin lerabos ha'ofos. What about, can he bring an olas ha'of? V'hayayin. Can he bring the wine in order to pour it on the mizbeach without a korban, even by itself, just pledge the wine? V'ha'levona, v'ha'etzim. Or can he bring frankincense as an offering, or can he bring wood as an offering, just like a Jewish person? Talmud lomar, therefore the pasuk says, nidrehem lechol nidrehem, nidvosam lechol nidvosam. The extra lechol tells me all of the types of offerings that are donated can be sent in by a non-Jew. He has access to every offering that he wants to. Imkain, if that's true, that a non-Jew can bring any type of offering at all, mat Talmud lomar ola, then why does the pasuk specifically tell me that if a non-Jew contributes, it's an ola? Prat lenazirus, to tell me there's one type of korban he can't do, right? He cannot bring korbanos of being a nazir, right? So we're going to see, right? He's not even that, as we're going to see, that a non-Jew cannot become a nazir, right? If he makes a pledge that he's going to be a nazir, it does not work. Right?
Except if he's a ger.
If he's a ger, he's not a non-Jew, right? Okay. So therefore he can be a nazir. But if he's a Jew, so if he's not a Jew, if he's a Jew, then he can be a nazir. But if he's not a Jew, so then he can't be a nazir. Hence, he cannot bring the korbanos of a nazir. Divrei Rabbi Yossi Haglili, that is what Rabbi Yossi Haglili holds. Any korban is accessible to a non-Jew. Rabbi Akiva Omer, Rabbi Akiva says, I disagree. Asher yakriv Hashem la'olah. No, you have to explain the pasuk. When it says that you're bringing your korban as an olah, ainli ela olah bilvad. Non-Jews can only bring a korban olah. All those other drashos, not for that purpose, right? Our Mishnah is only a therefore our Mishnah, which says that the mincha, there's a kmitza and it gets burned, and the rest of it is eaten by the kohen. That goes according to the shita of Rabbi Yossi Haglili. Okay, so now v'hai. Now let's talk about this ruling of Rabbi Yossi Haglili that a goy can make a pledge of any type of offering. So prat lenazirus. Are you telling me that the reason why it says ola is in order to tell me that a goy cannot bring a korban for being a nazir? Is that because it comes from here? Mehacha nafka, mehasam nafka. We know that a goy can't bring the korbanos of a nazir from a different source. When we're talking about a nazir itself, in Parshas Nazirus, in Bamidbar, Parak Vav, Daber el bnei Yisrael, v'amar telhem, speak to the Jewish people, and you shall say to them, Ish ki afli lindor neder nazir lahazir. A person who takes an oath in order to swear that he shall be a nazir to separate for Hashem. So, bnei Yisrael nodrin, vein ovdei kochavim nodrim, it only says the word ish once there, right? So therefore, it's only for Jewish people. Well, it says Daber el bnei Yisrael, that's where it's from. The source is Daber el bnei Yisrael. Right? Speak to the Jewish people. Only a Jewish person can become a nazir, not a non-Jewish, not a ovei kochavim can't become a nazir. So therefore, I don't need a special pasuk to tell me that he can't bring the korbanos if he can't be a nazir in the first place. Of course, he can't bring the korbanos. Yeah, but ime hasam. If I had learned it from there, havamina korban hu delo laisi aval nazirus chalalahu. If I would have learned it from Ola, I would have thought that he's not allowed to bring the korbanos, but he is allowed to be a nazir. Maybe he could become a nazir, but he can't bring the korbanos. So, kamash milan. So this pasuk tells me that not only can't he bring the korbanos, but he can't even be a nazir. Rishonim want to know. So then, if he can't be a nazir, why do I have to tell me not to bring the korbanos? The answer comes to tell me that even if a Jew becomes a nazir, he can't pay for the Jew's korban nazir.
So, something that he's not shy to do, he can't be with someone else?
Correct.
Something like that?
It's like that, right? Even though the other person's bringing the korban, right? Nevertheless, it's like he's being multi someone else. Therefore, the non-Jew can't be involved in it at all.
Oh, it's like, would be like necessarily someone's like a woman can be to a man for kiddush.
That's what I was trying to avoid, right? Because there, it's a shomer konis. Literally, the person has to be chayiv in the mitzvah, but it is like that because that's essentially what's happening here. Since he's not in the mitzvah, although it seems like it's two separate steps here, right? In other words, you wouldn't necessarily. If I said I'm not chayiv in the mitzvah, there's no special puzzle. If I'm not chayiv in the mitzvah, I can't be motzi somebody else. Here, you theoretically could be motzi someone else, but I have a separate puzzle telling me I can't. So. Kaman ozla ha ditnan. So now, who does the following Mishnah go like? Amar Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon says, Shiva Devarim Hiskinu based in v'zeh echad mehen. There are 7 things, the Mishnah says over there, that based in enacted, right? And this is one of them. If you have a non-Jew who sends his korban olah from overseas to Eretz Yisrael, he wants to send it to the Beis HaMikdash, v'shilach imo nisacheha, and he sends together with it the wine that's supposed to go with it, money to buy the wine, craven mishalo, then we're going to use his money in order to buy the wine. V'im lav, but if it doesn't have the wine that comes together with it, so then craven mishal tibor, then we enacted that we're going to pay for it anyway, right? We're going to pay for the wine in order to be able to accept the korban. Lema, so let's say this is Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Let's say this is Rabbi Yossi Aglili's opinion, and not Velo Rabbi Akiva, and not Rabbi Akiva, because Rabbi Yossi Aglili said that you can donate the wine, and Rabbi Akiva said you can't donate anything except an olah, right? Not the wine. So the answer is no.
The wine won't be kosher?
No, remember, we're buying, he's sending money, he's going to buy our wine, but we're saying why? We're presuming that it's because Rabbi Yossi Aglili just holds generally from that pasuk that things other than an olah can be donated by a non-Jew, and by the what's it called? By
73b3.
Rabbi Akiva says no, only the olah can be donated. So the answer is no. Afilu tema Rabbi Akiva. Even Rabbi Akiva would agree that that you're allowed to send the wine, even though it's an olah, because olah v'chol chaverta. That when he says that you can bring an olah, he holds that the non-Jew brings an olah plus whatever comes with an olah. So the wine, right, the wine comes with the olah. So therefore, it's part of the olah. Okay, so let's try another brisa and see whose shita this brisa is. Man tana laha de tana rabbanan. Who is the opinion who teaches the following from the rabbanan? Ezrach, the pasuk says by as far as bringing the nesachim of the korbanos, right? That's the wine that goes with the korbanos. It says kol Ezrach ya'aseh. All of the natural-born Jewish people should do it. So Ezrach, a Jewish person, mevi nesachim, ve'ino ve'kochav mevi nesachim. When it uses the word Ezrach, it means a Jewish person, not a non-Jewish person. Non-Jewish person doesn't bring nesachim. So whose opinion is that? Yachol lo te olah so te'u nesachim. You might think his olah doesn't require nesachim either, meaning it says he can't bring nesachim. So does that mean that he's not allowed to donate wine and say that's my korban? Or does it mean even if he brings an olah, he can't send wine together with the olah like a Jewish person can? Talmud Lomar, therefore the pasuk says, kacha, like so. Right? By this, right? In other words, this is that if you're bringing the nesachim for a korban, then you have to bring the korban's nesachim. But it's only therefore when it says that the Ezrach is talking about just wine by itself. So Mani, whose opinion is this? Lo Rabbi Yossi Aglili, velo Rabbi Akiva. It's not Rabbi Yossi Aglili's opinion or Rabbi Akiva's opinion. Why? Because Rabbi Yossi Aglili, if it was Rabbi Yossi Aglili's opinion, ha'amar filu yayin nami. Right? Rabbi Yossi Aglili said you can even donate wine and bring that. Rabbi Akiva, if it was Rabbi Akiva, according to the way we had learned Rabbi Akiva before, ha'amar ola in midiachrini lo, that he would only be able to bring the olah, not wine. And now you're saying you can bring wine together with my olah. So, Ibois Ema Rabbi Yossi Aglili, Ibois Ema Rabbi Akiva. The answer is I could hold it either one of them, actually. Depends on how you understand them. Ibois Ema Rabbi Yossi Aglili, let's start off with maybe it's Rabbi Yossi Aglili's opinion. Sami Meahi Yayin. Number one is the way that we learn the psukim, right? Kol included all the things that come together with it. Maybe kol doesn't include wine. We just presumed it did. But maybe even Rabbi Yossi Aglili holds that a non-Jew couldn't bring a wine korban by itself. Rabbi Akiva, or it could be Rabbi Akiva, like we just said, that Rabbi Akiva really holds that when a Jew brings a korban olah, he's allowed to. Non-Jew brings a korban olah, he can bring all the wine that goes together with it. He's just not allowed to bring wine by itself. Okay, next thing in the Mishnah. Rabbi Shimon Omer at the 2 dots. We are 10 lines from the bottom or so, right? Rabbi Shimon Omer minchas chote shel kohanim. Rabbi Shimon says that the minchas chote, the sin offering of the kohen, right, he's not going to be able to eat it because it's his own offering, but nevertheless, we first said that there's no kmitza on it because you're going to burn the whole thing. And Rabbi Shimon says, no, you do kmitza anyway, and then you burn the first part and then you burn the second part. So minani mili. Where does he learn this idea from? The Tana Rabbanan, our rabbis learned from the pasuk in Vayikra Hey, last week's parsha, right? The Haisala Kohen Kamincha, that it will be a Kohen like as a mincha. It will belong to the Kohen. The rest of it will be like minchas chote. So shetahei avodasa kisherabo. This tells me that the Kohen is allowed to bring his chatos on his own behalf. You could have thought potentially that, hey, you're the sinner, right? In kategor nasa senegor, we usually say, right? If you're the one who made the mistake, you can't be the defense attorney for your own actions, right? It's not good to be your own lawyer. Nevertheless, we see the pasuk tells us that a Kohen can bring his own korban chatos.
But if you go to court and they can't find a lawyer, for you, then what? You have to represent.
Are you asking in Canadian courts? In Canadian court, then I think in the United States, I know that the rule is that if you cannot afford a lawyer, one will be appointed for you.
Even here in Toronto, is good.
Fairly sure that's the way it is in
Even
Canada.
Toronto.
Right, but that is not connected to the Gemara, though. That is just your interesting legal advice. Okay, that's me offering good legal advice. Ata Omer shetehei avodasa kshirabo. Right. So now you're saying that what this pasuk means is that this Kohen is allowed to do his own korban chatos, that the avoda is kosher by him. Or is it telling us that the leftover after the shirayim for the mincha of the Kohen is also able to be eaten by Kohanim just like any other one? So, ma'ani mekayim v'chol minchas Kohen kalil tia lo se achel. So then how am I going to explain the pasuk that comes in this week's parsha, that all of the minchas of the Kohen should be completely destroyed and not eaten? So, how are you going to explain that? You just told me a mincha, if you're going to understand that the mincha of the Kohen can be, if the mincha of the chatos of a Kohen can be eaten, the answer is, minchas nidvaso. Maybe if he donates, a korban donates, if a Kohen donates an offering, if he donates, then you can't eat it, but the chatos, maybe he can eat. Avachovaso is obligatory offering, tehei nehachelas, maybe he can eat it. Tamalomar, so the Brisa says, don't think that. Pasuk says, v'haisa la kohen kamincha. It should be to the Kohen like a mincha. Makish chovaso linidvaso. We're going to compare, right? The Kohen is say it's going to be like a mincha. What does that mean, like a mincha? Like the other types of minchas. The mincha that's obligatory and the mincha that is a donation have the same rule. Ma nidvaso eina nechelas, just like the ones that he donates cannot be eaten, because we have a pasuk that says clearly not. Av chovaso eina nechelas, so too the Kohen's own chatos offering cannot be eaten. Therefore, when the pasuk is telling us that it's kosher by the Kohen, it means Kohen can bring his own chatos, but he cannot eat his own chatos. Okay, I'm Rabbi Shimon.
But could the other Kohanim eat the?
Nope. And so once, because the pasuk says, right, that it's right, can't be eaten at all by any Kohen. Right? Why is that? Because if you consider, right, how much of a korban is this? Here you have a big bowl of flour, right? You're bringing this isar of flour. You're taking one kamitza off of it, right? You're going to burn that. And the rest you get to eat. It's not really much of a korban. And then I forgot who it was who says this. I cannot remember who says this. He says, but then, yeah, and even if you, it looks like the Kohen's bringing his lunch to the Beis Hamikdash, right? He's just basically brought himself some food and he's making to a kamitza and he's eating the whole thing, right? And even if you say that he'll do his chatos and he'll give it to his friends, the other Kohanim, and then his other friends who are their Kohanim, they bring a chatos and they give it to him. So then they're just exchanging lunches, right? And there's nothing really. Fine, Yisrael, he brings the whole bowl, takes a kamitza and burns it. The rest of it goes to the Kohen. Right? The Kohen gets to eat himself. That doesn't look like it's like it's any real sort of a korban altogether. So the Kohanim themselves, even for the other Kohanim, can't eat it. Amar Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon says to the Tanakam, "V'chine'amar v'haisel Kohen kimincha so." 1 second, Rabbi Shimon says, because Rabbi Shimon's going to argue. Rabbi Shimon says that right, there's going to be a kamitza here that he's allowed to do. So he says, well, the pasuk doesn't say that the Kohen's chatos offering has to be compared to his own other mincha offerings, because we said the chatos is compared to his donated offerings. Just like he can't eat his donated offerings, so too he can't eat the chatos. Well, we're not comparing to his own offerings. V'alo lo nemar ela kamincha. The pasuk says you're going to compare his chatos to another mincha. Ela lahakish minchas chote shel kohanim l'nayin dalad amud aleph. Lakish minchas chote shel kohanim keminchas chote shel Yisrael. Maybe what we're doing is we're comparing the Kohen's chatos to a regular Jewish person's chatos. Ma minchas chote shel Yisrael nikmetzas, and such, we will come to the conclusion that just as the Kohen, just as a regular Jew's korban chatos gets a kmitza, so af minchas chote shel kohanim nikmetzas, so too the Kohen's mincha gets a kmitza. Well, 1 second though. How far do you want to take this, Rabbi Shimon? Ima minchas chote shel Yisrael nikmetzas ushiyareha ne'echolin. If you're going to compare it to a regular Jew's korban, the regular Jew's korban gets a kmitza, and then the kohanim get to eat it. Af mincha chote shel kohanim nikmetzas ushiyareha ne'echolin. Therefore, the Kohen's also do kmitza and then eat it. Even Rabbi Shimon says the kohanim can eat it. So Talmud Lomar, therefore the pasuk says la kohen kamincha. Right, so it says that it should be the Kohen as a mincha. La Kohen kamincha, v'lo leishim kamincha. The pasuk says that it's to the Kohen as a mincha, meaning the service of the kmitza, that's for the Kohen to do, just like a mincha. But as far as the portion that the mizbeach gets, what gets burned on the mizbeach, that's different. That's different. It doesn't say that the fire gets the same thing. The fire gets different. By a regular korban of a regular Jewish person, the fire gets only a kmitza. By the Kohen's, it gets the whole thing. So how are you supposed to do thing? How are you supposed to do both? You're going to do kmitza, and then you're going to burn the whole thing? Kometz karav ba'atzmo, you take the kmitza, you burn it by itself, the shirayim kraven ba'atzmon, and then you take the rest of the offering and you burn that as well. Okay, so now, let's talk about the Tanakhama's view. So we said that the halacha is, based on this pasuk, that a Kohen can do his own korban chatos, his own chatos offering, which by animals for sure he can do, and then even for his own korban mincha, he can bring his own korban mincha. Mehacha nafka, is this the source? Mehasam nafka, we learned it from a different place. Pasuk, we learn over here, it says, another brisa, minayin lekohen sheba, makriv korbanosov b'chol esu b'chol shashi yirtzeh. How do I know Kohen gets to skip the line, right? He gets the fast track pass. He wants to bring...
You get the fast line.
That's right, that's why he's hinting it. So he goes, if let's say, right, Kohen says, I'd like to bring my own animal, I don't need another Kohen's help to bring a korban. So he just walks right in, he grabs a sheep, and he walks right in, and he shechts it himself, and he offers it himself. He doesn't need to wait. So how do you know that? Talmud Lomar, the pasuk says, this is in Dvarim, right? Uba bechol avas nafsho. He can come whenever he desires, right? Kohen gets to serve whenever he wants. Now, they established, right, that Moshe Rabbeinu had established to divide the families up into groups of 8, and then it got expanded during David and Shlomo's time to 24 families, and they were coming once a week. Sure, that's true. But anybody who's a Kohen decides, you know what, I have a korban chatas I'd like to bring, you could show up anytime you want. Unannounced. Walk in and bring your own korban. So it says, this shereis, right? He can serve anytime he wants. So therefore, he can clearly bring his own korban, whatever he wants. Ime hasam. Now, if that was the source, havamina hani mili davar she'ein ba'al chet, I might have thought that he has this permission to do his own donated offerings. If he wants to bring a korban toda, whatever he wants, or shlomim, whatever he wants. Not his obligatory offerings like a chet. Aval davar sheba chet, something that he sinned, and now he has. So emalo, who says he's allowed to, right? So therefore it says so now the pasuk v'haisa la kohen kamincha, the kohen's allowed to do it like any other mincha, tells me even for a chatos, a kohen's allowed to do his own. So v'hanami, even that. We have another source for that. Mehacha nafka, is that from here? Mehasam nafka comes from someplace else. V'chipera kohen al hanefesh hashogeges bechet'a bishgaga. It says about the kohen, right? The kohen is going to atone for the soul who did an avera b'shogeg when he sins bishgaga. So it says al nefesh hashogeges. Why does it say the nefesh hashogeges and then bechet'a bishgaga? The one who sins through negligence and commits a sin through negligence. It's like a double language in the pasuk. The Malami to teach us shakohen mischaper al yedei atzmo. It's a drasha. One is the kohen is able to create a kapara for a nefesh that creates the shkaga, and for himself if he sins bishkaga. He can either atone for a soul who sins or for a sin himself that he has that he does.
Shgaga means soul, right?
No, nefesh means soul. Shgaga means negligence.
Negative.
Now, still, if I learned it from that pasuk, havamin, I would have thought honey mili bishogeg. That would only be if the kohen was allowed to bring a korban chatos if he committed the avera b'shogeg, because that's what the pasuk says. If he has b'shogeg, aval b'mezid lo. But if he has to bring a korban for a sin that he did on purpose, he wouldn't be able to bring that one. Kamash malon. So b'mezid, hey chimishkach, what are you talking about? When do you bring korban chatos? You bring korban chatos when you did an avera b'shogeg. No, you don't bring korban chatos when you did avera b'mezid. So the answer is no, there is time. Bizdon shavua. If I swear, let's say somebody says, right, that you owe me testimony, I would like you to swear testimony on my behalf, and you say no, I will not. You know you're lying. You're denying. You're going to have to bring a korban chatos for it. That is an avera that you're doing b'mezid on purpose, and the punishment is a korban. Yehuda's going to ask me why. Yeah.
When you know, you be sarcastic, and that's sarcasm because the
not sarcasm. There you go. Because if you say no, and then he shows up to court, there's no problem, right? He means no, and he doesn't show up to court. He refuses to come.
Why?
Why would he do that? So the answer is because people.
Bless you.
Thank you. People are avoid conflict, right? People do not like to get involved. You have two people arguing. I'd rather not take a side. Right? So you come along and you arguing with you, right? I'd rather not take a side. So, the Mefarshim say that person might not want to get involved in this conflict. It kind of makes sense, part of our nature, to not want to get into a conflict. So therefore, the Torah understands why you might do this avera and not come to court to testify. Therefore, it's sort of lesser of a mazid than other mazids, right? I'm not doing this because I'm getting personal benefit out of it. I'm really not involved in conflict. It's a good thing to not want to be involved in conflict. So therefore, the fact that I don't want to be involved in conflict, the tshuva is easier, right? You can bring a korban for that. So even you're doing it mevazid. This tells me that a kohen is even allowed to bring a korban, his own korban, if he does the avera mevazid. Tanya idach. We learned in another brisa about the minchas chote of a kohen. Rabbi Shimon says minchas chote shel kohanim nikmetzes. Right, the minchas chote of a kohanim, according to Rabbi Shimon's opinion, gets a kmitza. According to the Tanakhama, does not. Va'kometz korev bifnei atzmo. Now, what do you do with the kmitza and the rest of it? So, according to this brisa, the kmitza, you take it and you burn it on the mizbeach, and the shirayim krevim bifnei atzmon, and then you go back, you get the rest of the yisaron, and you dump that on the mizbeach. Rabbi Elazar ber Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Elazar, who is Rabbi Shimon's son, he says hakometz karev ba'atzmo. He says the komet is burned by itself. Va'shirayim, what do you do with the leftover everything else? Mispazrin al beis hadeshen. You spill the rest onto the beis hadeshen, the area of the ashes. Where is that? We'll see in a moment. Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba. Rabbi Chia bar Abba says, Havi ba Rabbi Yochanan. So Rabbi Yochanan said, what's going on in this brisa here? What is Rabbi Elazar saying? Beis hadeshen dehecha. Where is this beis hadeshen that you're dumping the rest of this korban? There was a huge pile of ashes that was on the top of the mizbeach, right? This is our mizbeach. We discussed back to our drawing board from a long time ago.
I know. I was kind of missing it.
Yes. Top view of the mizbeach. Okay, and a ramp, crudely drawn. Okay, and we've got our corners. Okay, we had fires on this mizbeach. We learned that we've got a big fire here. That's where we burn all our korbanos. We've got a little fire here. That's where we get the coals for the ktoras. Then, in this week's parasha, we have Eish HaMizbeach Tukad Bo Lo Sichbeh. We have an Eish Tamid. We leave that. Could be anywhere on the Mizbeach. Right? And then, we've got this big circle, big pile of stuff right here in the middle. That's all ashes. Right? They keep dumping the ashes, scoop the ashes.
From the animals?
It's the ashes of all the korbanos, right? And they wouldn't clear it off all yontif, and we get really high and piled because it shows. Look how many korbanos we brought. It's really kind of a neat thing, right?
We do it until it gets too crazy.
Right, till it gets too crazy, right? So maybe the Beis Hadeshen is here on the mizbeach. That's where we put it. Maybe that's what we're talking about. Well, if that's true, Hainu Avua, that's exactly what his father Shimon said, right? His father said you put it on the mizbeach, and then he comes along and says, no, put it on the mizbeach. That's not a machlokas then, if you're saying the same thing, right? So he says, Idilemata, there was another place where there was ashes, right? Every morning they would get up and they would scoop some of the ashes off and they would come down the ramp and they'd put them right over here. on the east side of the ramp. And that was also where they would throw the inside parts of the bird. Remember, they had to have an arm, they had to throw it all the way over the Mizbeach, we learned before, right? So they would have this area, the Beis Hadeshin over here, and they would scoop up some of the ashes and they'd have there. Maybe that's where you put it. So the problem is, Yesh Lecha Davar Shekarev Lamata. It's supposed to be, it says in the Pasuk that it's supposed to be offered on the Mizbeach, and we don't have such a thing as offering it on the Mizbeach, off the Mizbeach, right? That doesn't make sense. So
like wherever it go up can come down.
That is true, but that's not this issue. It's just that the pasuk says the pasuk that we were learning from, right, was that on Mizbeach, right? It's on the Mizbeach. It says so. So Amar le Rabbi Abba. So Rabbi Abba says to Rabbi Yochanan, Dilma liibud. Maybe what Rabbi Eliezer means that it is the one down below, but he's not. It's not supposed to be, right? Because Rabbi Eliezer says, doesn't mean that it's supposed to be offered as a korban. The rest of the shirayim is destroyed. It's not offered as a korban. It's destroyed. That's why it's put on the bottom. So that's what it means. And by the way, right, what happened? How did they get this ashes? If they're putting new ashes every morning, what happened? One of the nisim that was in the Beis Hamikdash was that this pile of ashes would get absorbed into the ground every day. Right?
Would it open up? Would there like an area that would open up to that? It was a miracle,
right? Yeah, just went in and absorbed. So therefore, that's what that. So that's what they could. That was their disposal area, right? So that maybe that's what it means. So, right? Tani, we learned in a brisa. Avuha derbi Abin. Rabbi Abin's father said, "Kol minchas kohen kalil tiyeh lo se'achel." The pasuk in this week's parsha says, all the minchas, this is a great Dvar Torah, right? Great Dvar Torah, which not anybody's going to appreciate at your Shabbos table, right? Right? I had a great drasha. We might have thought, where do you put the extra dough from a korban chatos that a kohen brings for himself? And everybody's like, what are you talking about?
Rabbi, yes. Get us in that tomorrow night.
That's right. Nobody's going to buy it. So, kol minchas,
but that's it.
Kol minchas kohen kalil tiyeh lo se achel. All of the minchas of a kohen shall be completely consumed, and it shall not be eaten. La'achila hi kashtiha v'lo ledavar acher. Right? So that means that the whole point of the pasuk is to tell me that it's compared to the Bryce is saying that the mincha of the kohen is compared only in the sense to the other that the chatas of a kohen is compared to the other mincha only in the sense that it is not eaten, right? Not as far as how it is supposed to be brought. The minchas chavitin is burned on the mizbeach, whereas the minchas chote is not, right? You have the kmitza, and the rest of it is destroyed, and that's how he learns there's a difference. Okay, so now my ka'amar. So how are you going to read this pasuk? How do you read the pasuk like that, where you're going to say that the pasuk itself is talking about the minchas chote? It says kalil tiyeh. It's supposed to be completely burned up. So how are you going to explain? It means that you have to destroy it, not burn it. So Amar Abaye. So Abaye says you have to read the pasuk in a weird way. He says hachi kamar. This is what it means. Kol minchas kohen. Any mincha of the kohen lo se achel. Go skip to the end of the pasuk. Right? Any mincha of the kohen, ... end of the pasuk, shall not be eaten. Chovaso, and that's talking about his obligatory offerings. That's the korban chatos. Kalil tiyeh, when it says in the middle of the pasuk, kalil tiyeh shall be burned, that's nidvaso. That's his voluntary offerings. Those get burnt up. That's how you have to explain according to Rabbi Avid. Amar le Rava. Rava says, I love this answer. Sakina charifa mafsika kroy. You're taking scissors and cutting the pasuk into little pieces. He says that's how you treat a pasuk. You just cut the middle out, put it around. Right? You don't do that to the pasuk. El Amar Rava. Rava says same result, but here's how you have to read the pasuk. Kol minchas kohen. Any mincha of the kohen. Kalil tiyeh nidvaso.
What did the scissors back then?
Kalil tiyeh nidvaso. It shall be completely destroyed. That is his nidava, his gift offering. V'lo seachel chovaso. And then the one that his chova, his chatos, is not eaten, right? But it is not burnt either, right? It's just put into the Beis Hadeshin off the side of the mizbeach. Okay. Ve'ipochana. Why don't you learn it the other way around? Why don't you say that it's his gift offering that doesn't get that doesn't get eaten, and the chatos gets burned. Why did you decide the other way around? Mistabra nidvaso havalei l'rabuye. It makes more sense that the nedava is going to be the one that is burned like the mincha of the chavitin. Shekain tadir, because it's similar to the minchas chavitin, to his donated offering. How? Shekain tadira. It's offered more often, right? That makes more sense, right? Any of his donated offerings can happen more often. And lo chate, and it doesn't have to do with a sin. And bisim reiche, right? It's a pleasant offering because it's for a kindness offering. It's something that you're doing when you're being nice to Hashem. Yeah, but adirabba. I'll look at the other way. Chovaso havalei l'rabuye. We should come to include the chatos, the one that is obligatory. Why? Because shekain isaron. Just like the mincha machvas, it's brought as an isaron. That's a larger volume, and chova, it's obligatory. So the answer is hanach nefishin. So the answer is no. There's more comparisons between the minchas nedava to the minchas chavitin of the kohen gadol than there is for the minchas chavitin to the korban chatos of the kohen. So therefore, that's why we'll compare it, and that's why it will be burned up just like the chavitin. Okay. Onward. Verabanan. Now let's go back to the Rabbanan. Right? They say that the korban chatos of the kohen is also completely burned. So, Hai kol minchas kohen kalil tia lo seachel ma'avdilei. How do they interpret this pasuk? We divided this pasuk just a moment ago according to Rabbi Shimon and said some offerings are burned, some are put on the Beis Hadeshin. According to the Chacham, that says all of them are burned. How do you read this pasuk? So, miboy lehu lechanatanya. They read this pasuk according to the following usage as per this brisa. Ein li ella el yona. So we have the first pasuk. The first pasuk says, it's talking about the minchas chavitin. That's the kohen gadol's offering that he's going to bring in the morning and in the afternoon, right? It says bekalil taktar. It says there that it's completely burned. The kohen gadol's offering is completely burned. V'tachtona in the next pasuk, which is talking about the mincha of all the other kohanim, below seachel. It says you shall not eat it. How do I know to teach me that a kohen's regular mincha is completely burned, and also there's a losa if you eat it, and also to tell me that the kohen gadol is completely burned, and also there's a losa if you eat that? Talmud Lomar, I have Gzera Shava that says Kalil Gzera Shava. It's like a Gzera Shava from one pasuk to the next pasuk. It's very interesting. They don't use it as a hekesh, right? They say it's a Gzera Shava, right? It's completely burnt, right? Nemar Khan, that's probably what. Nemar Khan Kalil, v'Nemar Holan Kalil. It says here it's completely burned up. It says here completely. Malam Kalil Taktar, Afkam Kalil Taktar. Just like the Minchas Chavit is completely burned up, so too all of the other coins Menachos are burned up. Umakan litain los aseh ala achila. So just like there's a los aseh for eating all of the other korban chatoses of a kohen, so therefore aflahalan litain los aseh ala achila, so a los aseh as well. So therefore that's what they use this pasuk for, and there's no distinction. They're all of the kohen, all the kohen's mincha offerings are burned up, whether chatos or any other type. Okay, boy Ravina asks the question. Kohen she'achal min ha'amurin. What if a kohen eats the limbs that are normally burned on the mizbeach? Now we're not talking about the chaylev fats. The chaylev fats for sure are a los aseh. There's a pasuk the Torah says that those are not kosher. You can't eat those. We're talking about other parts of a korban which are kosher in a normal animal, but they're part of the korban. You're supposed to burn it up. So mahu. So what is? Do you get an isser? Does the kohen get an isser if he eats that, right? We just talked about that if a kohen eats the burnt parts of the mincha, then he gets a los aseh. That we just learned, so now that's the connection. So now if he eats the burnt parts of an animal, does he get a los aseh? So, lav dezoris lo kami boili. As far as him getting the punishment for what you usually think of as zar means a non-kohen, right? Somebody who is not eligible to do this service is called a zar. Here, a kohen is not eligible to eat this limb, so he's a zar. So the pasuk already tells me that there's a pasuk that a zar is not allowed to do that, is not allowed to eat the korban. So in this fact is that he's a zar with regards to this. For sure, he gets a los aseh. So that for sure, we didn't have a question about that. For sure, there's a los aseh involved for him eating it as a zar. My question is lav de kalil tiyamai. This prohibition about eating that which is supposed to be burned, does it apply also to an animal offering? In other words, was that a rule by a korban mincha only, or does that now apply by the animal as well? Amar Rav Aaron l'Ravina. Somebody pointed out that Rav Aaron exists twice in Shas, right? Once by korbanos. So Rav Aaron, you don't see
Why do you see more of him?
You don't see more Aarons, Moshes, Davids, right? It wasn't Rab David, Rab Avraham, right? So it's like interesting. They're always like Rabbi Yishmael, you see, right? You know, so I always wonder where they weren't like those names weren't so popular then, right? He's anonymous, right? That's it. Machlokas whether he's a person or not.
What we're going to find out when Chef comes.
Yeah, I haven't met any Yidden named Yishmael.
Right? You don't see a lot of Yishmaels these days. Here's Amar Rav Aaron l'Ravina. So Rav Aaron says to Ravina, Toshma, come and listen. This issue about eating the burned parts of the korban. Is it a lo saseh of kalil tiyah? Detanya where Rabbi Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi says, Kol shehu bekalil tiyah. Any time there's something that's supposed to be burned on the mizbeach, just completely destroyed, litain lo saseh achila. So that's where there's a lo saseh. From the mincha, tell me, is also a lo saseh of lo se achel. You cannot eat it. So indeed, another prohibition. Next Mishnah. Minchas Kohanim, the mincha of Kohanim, minchas Kohen Mashiach, and the mincha of the anointed Kohen. That's the mincha of the Chavitin, right? Thank you. Minchas Nesachim, and that's the extra wine that comes together with it's not extra, but the wine that comes together with an animal offering. La Mizbeach ve'ein bahen la Kohanim. So that goes to the Mizbeach. It doesn't belong to the Kohanim. In this circumstance, the Mizbeach wins, the Kohanim don't get a part, right?
What's on the Mizbeach? It's completely burnt.
Well, we're going to see. But when we're talking about the wine, it doesn't get burnt per se, right? It gets poured into the bowls, right? But nevertheless, yes, right? It goes to the Mizbeach, and the Kohanim don't get any portion of it. The Kohanim don't get to walk away with anything. Shtei alechem, the 2 loaves of bread for Shavuos, v'lechem apanim, and the loaves of bread that are on the lechem, that's the shulchan, nechalim the Kohanim, those go to the Kohanim, ve'in bahen l'Mizbeach, and the Mizbeach don't get any part of that. Ubazeh yafek Kohanim, yikoach Mizbeach. That's where the Kohanim win, the Mizbeach loses. Says the Gemara of a 2 lekah. Really, there's no other circumstances where there are korbanos that are completely on the Mizbeach and the Kohanim get none of it. V'hayik ola. What about a korban ola? Korban ola also goes to the Mizbeach, the Kohanim don't get any of it. The answer is no. Ika ora la Kohanim. The skin goes to the animal, to the Kohen, right? The skin goes to the Kohen. V'hayik ola sa'of. What about the bird offering? There's no skin on a bird offering. Ika mura'ah v'notza. The crop and the... What is that called? The crop and the whatever the feathers, right? So that gets torn out. We said that gets thrown into that pile over there. So that doesn't go to the mizbeach either, right? What about if somebody wants to bring the wine together with the nesachim, right? Not the right. If he wants to bring that, so the answer is l'shisin osli. That gets poured down the shisin. So that's why it's not included as well. Didn't we include it? Or minchas nesachim?
Minchas could be like what's like connected to the ola.
Yes. So
It could be just nesachim plain.
hashaba'in minchas nesachim. Right. That is a wine. That is the offer. It's just wine by itself. Right. It's not nisacham mayim here. This is the yayin, right? The pouring of the wine, which we do by all korbanos. Okay. Though it seems like the one that is poured, but with the animal, gets poured on the fire. This one that is a mincha of wine gets poured into the shisin. That's the difference. Umay bazu. So why did we even list this? What is the big point of saying these are the things that go to the Mizbeach and not to the Kohen? Lafuke de Shmuel. To tell us the halacha is not like Shmuel. Damar Shmuel. Shmuel says, Hamisnadev yayin. If somebody donates wine as his mincha, he says, Meviu umizalfo al gabi ishim. He says that you do burn the wine on the Mizbeach. Right? You sprinkle it onto the Mizbeach. And therefore... Right, it should be in the list of the Mishnah. So Kamash Milan Dilishisin Osli. The reason why he didn't put it on is because it gets poured down the bowl, the tube in the corner of the Mizbeach, and not onto the fire. Misayeya Leila Shmuel. Also, it supports what Shmuel said. Damar Shmuel. Shmuel says Hamisnadev Shemen. If somebody donates oil without a korban, he's just saying I want to donate my oil as my korban mincha. Komto, you do a kamitza on the oil. Ushiyarav ne'acholin, and the rest of the oil gets eaten. So therefore, it does go to the Kohanim. So that's why it's not listed on the list. Shtei alechem velechem aponim. The next thing is the shtei alechem, the 2 loaves of bread, and the lechem aponim. Those are eaten by Kohanim. The mizbeach gets none of it. The 2 lecha, there's nothing else like that. V'ha'ika chatas ha'of. What about the bird chatos, where the Kohen gets to eat that and it doesn't get burned on the mizbeach? The answer is ika dama. The blood gets applied to the mizbeach. V'ha'ika log shemen shel metzora. What about the log of oil that the metzora brings? So that gets a gift to the Kohen. So the answer is ikam matnosav. Little drops of it don't go to the Kohen though. They get applied to the metzora's ear, thumb, and toe. Umay bazo. So then why do we list this? What is the point of mentioning it? Lafuki miman damar shtei alechem habos bifnei atzmon lisreifan osyon. Is to exclude the opinion that we had earlier. What if you have no sheep? We said that you could still bring the korban shtei alechem without any sheep. Can you eat them afterwards? So it's machlokas. One opinion said, yes, they eat them, and one says, no, you burn it on the Mizbeach. This Mishnah comes to tell me, no, the Shtei Alechem are never burned on the Mizbeach. So, Kamash Malan, Debazu Yafekoch, Kohanim Liolam, that the Kohanim are always getting the Shtei Alechem, the Mizbeach never gets them. Next Mishnah. Kol ha-menachos hanasos bikli. All menachos are made in a utensil, so, te'unos shlosha matona shemen. So those, if they're made in a utensil, you're going to see some of them. There's a mafet tanur is not sanctified in a utensil, right? These are ones where you bring the flour before. So what you do is it needs to have 3 applications. Now we're going to get into the process of exactly how the mincha was brought. It's amazing. You get to like page 74 before you're like, okay, how is this actually done? So now we're going to say, here is how it is. There's 3 oil applications. Okay, Velohein yitzika. One is in reverse order, right? It's backwards. The last one is we're going to pour oil on the top of the finished product. Ubalila, you're going to mix oil into the korban, and matan shemen bakli kodim lasiyason, and a first drop of oil that you put into the utensil before you put any in the first place. So the first thing you do, you pour a little oil into the bowl, then you put the oil in, right? And then we're going to see that you're going to put a little water in, and then you're going to mix up. Now that it comes in.
So you dilute it.
And we're going to see a little bit of you create a dough, really, more than diluting, right? And then you're going to add more oil, or potentially add more oil, or you're going to take it, bake it, then crumple it up, and then add more oil. Then you're going to then you're going to add at the end a yitzika, another amount of oil to pour over it at the end. So that'll be our machlokas. Huh? That's correct. Okay, chalos. Now, if you have this is the baked offerings that you have chalos and rakikin. So what do you do when you have chalos? So first he says chalos bolalon. So what he says that if you're when you bake them, you take a little bit of oil, you pour it in, you put the flour in, you mix it up, you take it out, you bake it. Then after you bake it, then you break it up into pieces, and then you mix more oil in. Okay, that's how that's what different Rabbi. That's how Rabbi holds that you do it by the chalos. V'chachamim omrim, and the chacham say no, so less. You're going to mix the second amount of oil in before you bake it. So you put the oil in, put the flour in, put some water, and then mix more oil in. Then mix it up. Then bake it. Then take it out and crumple it up. Right? That's how it goes in which order. So then we learn chalos to unos belila. The chalos offering, the chalos baked breads, right? Those, they need belila. That means that you're going to crumple them up after they're made, and you're going to mix them with oil, or according to the chachamim, you mix them with oil first. But you're going to crumple them up, and they need to be mixed together with oil. Urakikin, the flat wafers, which are also baked in the oven, they're crispier, right? So those get meshicha. You don't mix them up with oil, you anoint them with oil. And we'll see how that process. Ketzad moshchan, how do you anoint the oil on them instead of mixing the oil in? Kimin ki, you have a key, right? What is a key? We're going to see in the Gemara what a key is. So we'll see in a moment. Or ushar hashemen necha lekohanim, and the rest of the oil is eaten by the kohanim, right? Key, various interpretations of what the letter key is, right? It's a Greek letter key, right? The Greek letter. So what is that?
It says chi.
Right? I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce that in Greek because I'm Greek. Right? So he says it's a letter kaf, right? That's the letter kaf in Greek is called the key. However, Rashi in the Ksav Yad says letter tes, right? And what does letter tes look like? So letter tes also has sort of the same look to it. There is a Rambam, I believe, that it says it's the letter chi in Greek, which looks like the letter X. And then there's another explanation that it's the lambda letter. It's the letter lambda, which is the 11th letter of the Greek alphabet, which makes sense because the chaf is the 11th letter of the Hebrew alphabet. And then there's another explanation that it's the upsilon, which looks like a U, which looks like a chaf, incidentally, turned sideways, but the U, upsilon, because it's the 20th letter of the alphabet, which is the gematria of the letter chaf. So, right, it's a kamin chaf, right? So there's lots of different explanations of exactly how this anointing was done. Big, huge machlokas rishonim. Okay, says the Gemara. So it says the ones that are made in a utensil have 3 applications of oil. Lemu'ute mai. So what is that coming to exclude? Amar Rav Papa, the Rav Papa says, Lemu'ute minchas ma'afeh. The ones that are baked in the oven, right? So they don't get 3, they only get 2, right? Because they don't have...
It's pronounced Kai.
Kai, okay, good. That's it, there you are.
I was listening to it.
There you are, Kai, thank you.
No problem.
So, it doesn't get the last. When you have the oven baked offerings, we were discussing when you mix the oil in, you get the first bit of oil, then you put the thing in, and then we discussed whether you bake it first, crumple it, and mix the oil in, or you add the oil, then you mix it up, and then you bake it, and then crumple it up. But either way, there's no additional extra oil put on at the end in a minchas matha. Okay, that's what we're saying. Tana Rabbanan rabbis learned. Ve'imachas minchas marcheshes korbanecha. If your last week's parsha, if your korban mincha that you're bringing is a marcheshes. Remember, we had 2 types of pans. We had as donated offerings, a marcheshes and a machvas. Marcheshes was the flat pan. Machvas was the deep pan.
Deep pan was more like a rock.
No, the deep pan was like, remember we said it was like that U shape, right? That U shape. So minchas marcheshes. So in minchas marcheshes, korbanecha solas b'shemen te'aseh. You're supposed to make your korban from fine flour. With oil you shall make it. Melamed, shetuna matan shemen b'kli. That tells us, first step, put a little oil in the utensil. Okay, that's the source for the first amount of oil. Then it says, korbanecha ligzera shava. Then we have the word korbanecha, both by the marcheshes and also by the mincha machvas.
Why did they say twice, korbanecha?
Because it's Gzera Shava, to tell me that the rule is the same by a marcheshes as it is by the machvas. A little oil in first, right? So therefore you are going to, the rule is going to be the same by the both of them. Makan maton shemen bekli, just like by the marcheshes, which seems to be implied in the pasuk, that you're going to put a little oil in first. Af laholon, so too by the machvas, matan shemen bekli, you're going to put a little oil in the utensil. Ma laholon yitzika, the belila. So now, by the machvas, in those psukim, it tells us that you have to mix more oil in, and then you have to pour more oil in at the end. So afkan yitziko belila. So too, by the marcheshes, you're going to mix more oil in and then add more oil in the end. So basically, through the Gzera Shava, we're going to learn all 3 oil applications by the marcheshes and the machvas. Okay, now the Mishnah says, chalos bolalon. Divri Rabbi, the Chamim Solas. The question with the Minchas Ma'afa is, when do you add the oil, right? Are you going to add them before you crumple up the bread or after you crumple up the bread? Before you bake it or after you bake it and crumple it up? So Tana Rabbanan, we learned in a brisa. I think this applies to all of the korbanos, right? By the marcheshes and the machvas also. Their machlokas is continuous all throughout. So here's what it says in the brisa to explain. Soles belula, in this pasuk talking about the machvas, it says that it's soles belula. It is soles which is mixed up. Melamed she nivleles soles. So that tells me that the oil is supposed to be mixed up while it is still soles, while it's still flour before you bake it. Rabbi says, chalos belulon. No, you bake them first, crumple them up, and then add the oil. Why? Shenemar chalos belulos. They are loaves that are then mixed together with the oil. Amrulo, the Chum said to Rabbi, we see what you're saying, but that doesn't make sense. V'alo lachmei toda nebar behen chalos. So it says, look at the korban toda. it also says they're chalos. And they're belulos bashem, and they're supposed to be mixed with oil. Now, if you've already baked them into bread, and you break them up, then you've got these chunks of bread that you're trying to take this little amount of oil, right? Because you remember, you've got your log of oil, and you're dividing it into thirds. You've got basically a third of a log of oil, and you've got 40 loaves of bread here. That's a tremendous amount for that little amount of oil. It's impossible to mix it all up that way. Ella solas. Rather, you've got to mix the oil in while it's still dough, while it's still solas. Ketzad oseh. So what do they say you're supposed to do? Nosein shemen bakli kodim lasiyasan. First step, 1, put the oil in before you put any of the flour in. Then vinos na. Then you put the flour in. Vinos and shemen aleha ubolula. Then you put more oil in and you mix it up with a little water, of course. Vilosha, and then you knead the dough. Ve'ofa, and then you bake it. Upotisa, then you take it out of the oven, crumple it up into crumbs. V'nosein aleha shemen, and then you pour the last yitzika of oil on it. V'kometz, then you do the kmitza. Rabbi says, no, I'll tell you the order. Chalos bolalon. Right? It says you're supposed to put the oil in once it's already chalos. Shenamar, as the pasuk says, chalos belulos bashemen. It's chalos that are mixed up together with oil. Ketzad oseh. What do you got to do? Nosein shemen, oil in the utensil. Kodem lasiyasa, before you put any of the flour. Before you put the flour in. Venosna. Then you put the flour in. Velosha. Then you add the water in and you mix it up. Veofa, and then you bake it. Upotisa. Take it out of the oven and crumple it up. Nosein aleha shemen, then you add the oil, ubolila, and mix it all together. V'chozer v'nosein aleha shemen, then you pour the last yitzika on it, v'kometz, and you do the kmitza. Arguing whether you're going to add more oil before or after you bake it. Okay, so the question is, the Chacham said we don't like Rabbi's explanation because they said efshar dekamri la rabbanan la Rabbi mahi. What do they mean by it's impossible? You just do it. You just put the oil in. What's so impossible about it? Amar Rabbi Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak. Shmuel bar Yitzchak says revius shemini. We're talking about a quarter of a lug of oil. Not so much, right? Little like a revius, like that, right? So heich mischalekes lekama chalos. How can you have enough to pour all over? If you're mixing it to dough, so you pour it into the dough and you mix it up. That makes sense. But once it's already divided out, you've got all these chalos and you've got like a stack of croutons here, and you're taking this much oil. How do you even get that over everything? It's not possible. So that's why this is not possible. Okay, stop here.
Amar Rav Shmuel, right?
Hachalos tu'unas belila urikik and meshicha. That's what we're going to pick up. Turn around one.
Yeah.
On the top of my hand.
I have this problem with salad dressings.